The year was 1942. In a basement laboratory on the University of Chicago campus, something impossible was recorded. The sound lasted exactly 12 seconds. Only 7 people ever heard the original recording. What happened to those 7 people remains unexplained to this day. Attention. The case you are about to hear was hidden for decades. Before we begin, write in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is at this exact moment, because this story began at exactly the same time. Dr. Thomas Elwood Morris was not considered brilliant by his colleagues. His work in acoustic physics was methodical but unremarkable until the morning of February 23rd in the year 1942, when everything changed. The winter had been unusually cold that year. Snow piled against the windows of the physics building where Dr. Morris maintained his modest laboratory. His research focused on capturing high-frequency sound waves beyond human hearing. Nothing revolutionary, nothing that should have attracted attention, but something happened during experiment number 417. According to a report filed in April of 1942, Dr. Morris was testing a new recording device he had modified himself. The machine used magnetic wire rather than traditional phonograph technology. It could capture sounds at frequencies no human ear could detect, sounds that existed but remained unheard. That night, Dr. Morris worked alone. The janitor later testified that he saw lights on in the laboratory past midnight. He thought nothing of it. Scientists often worked unusual hours. What makes this night different was what happened afterward. The following morning, Professor Walter Nichols found Dr. Morris still in his laboratory. He was sitting perfectly still, staring at the recording device. The machine was still running. According to Professor Nichols, Dr. Morris looked different. His eyes were wide. His hands trembled slightly. When asked if he was all right, Dr. Morris simply said he needed to play something for him. What happened during the next 12 seconds would change everything. Professor Nichols later described the recording as unlike anything I have ever heard. Not music, not speech, not noise. Something altogether different, something that seemed to exist between sound and silence. Within days, 5 more colleagues had heard the recording. Their reactions were documented in a departmental memo that was later sealed by university administration. According to one source who requested anonymity, the reactions ranged from profound religious awe to severe psychological distress. Dr. Morris claimed he had recorded the voice of God. The university administration responded quickly. The laboratory was temporarily closed for what was officially described as routine maintenance. Dr. Morris was asked to take a brief leave of absence. The recording device was confiscated and placed in secure storage, but something had already been set in motion. According to records from Northwestern Memorial Hospital, Professor Nichols was admitted 3 days after hearing the recording. The diagnosis was listed as acute nervous exhaustion. But nurse Margaret Williams noted something unusual in her private diary, later donated to the Chicago Historical Society. She wrote, "The new patient from the university does not sleep. He stares at the ceiling and whispers numbers, the same sequence, over and over. When I asked him what the numbers meant, he looked at me as if seeing someone else. Then he said, 'Frequencies.'" Professor Nichols would be released 2 weeks later. He immediately resigned his position. According to property records, he purchased a small cabin near Lake Michigan. He lived there in isolation until his death in 1951. The second person to hear the recording was Dr. Helen Porter, a respected physicist specializing in wave propagation. According to her colleagues, Dr. Porter listened to the recording once. She then methodically destroyed all her research notes from the past 15 years. When asked why, she reportedly said, "They ask the wrong questions." Dr. Porter disappeared from public record for nearly 3 decades. She resurfaced in 1971 as the founder of an unusual religious community in northern Wisconsin. The group called themselves the Listeners. Their practices remained largely unknown to outsiders. The third listener was Dr. James Sullivan. His reaction diverged significantly from the others. According to department records, Dr. Sullivan immediately declared the recording a hoax. He insisted Dr. Morris had manipulated the equipment to create an unusual acoustic effect. Nothing more. But something doesn't align with this explanation. A letter from Dr. Sullivan to his brother, dated March 10, 1942, tells a different story. He wrote, "I cannot unhear it. The sound seems to exist in my mind now, replaying itself when I least expect it. During lectures, during dinner, during conversations, I hear it beneath everything else. What troubles me most is not the sound itself, but that it seems to be changing." Dr. Sullivan would continue his academic career for another 7 years. Colleagues noted his increasing preoccupation with ancient religious texts. His published papers began to focus exclusively on the acoustic properties of sacred spaces, churches, temples, and prehistoric sites designed for their unusual sound qualities. The fourth person to hear the recording was Dr. Morris's research assistant, Elizabeth Chen. Unlike the others, Miss Chen's response was not immediately apparent. She continued her work in the department. She appeared unaffected, but her personal journal, discovered after her death in 1989, revealed something else entirely. She had begun a systematic attempt to recreate the conditions of experiment 417, in secret, at night, using equipment she gradually assembled in her apartment. Her journal entry from April 2, 1942, the original recording captured something that exists between frequencies. Not a voice as we understand it, more like an impression left on sound itself. I believe what we heard was merely an echo, a reflection. The actual source must be continuous. Miss Chen never completed her work. University records indicate she abruptly withdrew from her studies in May of 1942. No reason was provided. Her journal entries end shortly after. The final page contains only a series of numbers. Analysis later suggested they were geographic coordinates for a location in the Mojave Desert. The fifth witness was Dean William Harrison. As head of the physics department, he was required to evaluate the situation. According to meeting minutes, Dean Harrison listened to the recording on March 15, 1942. His official assessment was brief: unusual acoustic anomaly, likely equipment malfunction, matter closed. But a sealed memo sent to University President Robert Hutchins told a different story. The memo, declassified in 1976, contained a single paragraph. The recording should be destroyed immediately. No further testing should be permitted. Dr. Morris requires medical intervention. This is not a scientific matter. The recording was not destroyed. Instead, it was transferred to a military research facility outside Chicago. The transfer was authorized by the sixth person to hear it: Colonel Thomas Reed of the United States Army Signal Corps. Military records from this period remain heavily redacted. What is known comes primarily from a series of interviews conducted in 1967 with former staff members. According to these accounts, Colonel Reed arrived at the university with 2 technical specialists. They transported the recording device in a specially designed container. Colonel Reed insisted on listening to the recording alone. He emerged from the laboratory 30 minutes later. A secretary reported that his face appeared unusually pale. When asked for his assessment, Colonel Reed simply said, "National security matter, classified effective immediately." The recording and the device were loaded into a military vehicle. Dr. Morris was informed that his research now fell under the authority of the War Department. This was not unusual during 1942. Many scientific projects were appropriated for the war effort, but what happened next suggests something very different from conventional weapons research. According to documents obtained through the Freedom of Information Act, the recording was taken to Camp Ellis, a newly constructed military installation 190 miles southwest of Chicago. Within weeks, a specialized facility was established there. The project was codenamed Whisper. Dr. Morris was recruited to continue his work under military supervision. He accepted. Those who knew him said he had little choice. His research had become his obsession. The seventh and final person known to have heard the original recording was Chaplain Michael Brennan. His involvement remains the most puzzling aspect of the case. Military records indicate he was specifically requested by Colonel Reed, though they had no prior connection. Chaplain Brennan's personal diary, donated to Georgetown University Library in 1981, contains several entries about his experience at Camp Ellis. His writing grows increasingly fragmented over time. In July 1942, he wrote, "They believe they are studying the recording. They do not understand. The recording is studying them." 2 months later, Morris says he can now identify patterns, mathematical sequences. He believes he can isolate individual components within the sound. "I have advised against this. Some things are not meant to be dissected." The final entry regarding the project dated October 12, 1942. "The new equipment arrives tomorrow. Morris believes he can amplify the signal, extract more detail. Reed has authorized the test despite my objections. They cannot hear what I hear. Beneath the sound, there is intent." What happened during that test on October 13th remains unclear. Military records indicate a critical equipment failure, resulting in the destruction of the laboratory section. The official report cites an electrical fire. 3 personnel were listed as injured, none fatally. But telephone records show a series of urgent calls between Camp Ellis and Washington in the hours following the incident. The entire project was immediately terminated. All personnel were reassigned. The remaining equipment was destroyed under direct orders from the Pentagon. Dr. Morris was hospitalized for severe burns and smoke inhalation. Upon recovery, he was honorably discharged from government service. He returned to Chicago in January 1943. The university did not renew his position. For several years, Dr. Morris attempted to continue his research independently. Former colleagues described him as increasingly isolated, focused entirely on recreating his lost work. But without institutional resources or funding, his progress was limited. In 1946, Dr. Morris published a paper in an obscure scientific journal. The paper, titled "Acoustic Gateways: Theoretical Approaches to Trans-Dimensional Sound Propagation," was largely ignored by the scientific community. Those who did read it dismissed it as the work of a once promising scientist whose career had veered into pseudoscience. But certain passages suggest Dr. Morris had developed a new understanding of what he had recorded 4 years earlier. He wrote, "Sound is merely the physical manifestation of something more fundamental. What we perceive as acoustic phenomena may in fact be incidental, like shadows cast by objects we cannot directly observe." And later, certain frequencies, when properly aligned, may function not as sounds themselves, but as windows through which other forms of communication might pass. The observer effect is critical. The act of recording such phenomena inherently alters them. The act of listening completes the circuit. The paper included no experimental data, no references to his work at the university or Camp Ellis. Nothing that would violate his government confidentiality agreement. Just theoretical concepts presented without context. Dr. Morris made one final attempt to continue his research in 1948. He approached several private foundations for funding, According to correspondence preserved in the Chicago Historical Society archives, one such letter contained an unusual proposal. He wrote, "What I am proposing is not the development of new recording technology, but rather a new understanding of listening itself. The human ear perceives only a narrow band of acoustic reality. Even with technological assistance, we remain limited by our conceptual framework. We hear only what we expect to hear. I propose to develop methods for listening beyond expectation." No foundation accepted his proposal. Dr. Morris exhausted his personal savings, continuing his work alone. By 1950, former colleagues reported he had become increasingly reclusive. He rarely left his small apartment. Visitors described walls covered with complex mathematical equations and diagrams. The final documented encounter with Dr. Morris comes from an unexpected source. Father James Donnelly of St. Clement's Church kept a record of unusual pastoral conversations. In an entry dated September 3, 1950, he described a visit from a troubled physicist who claimed to have heard what exists between moments of silence. According to Father Donnelly, the man asked a single question. If God spoke directly to you, would you share what you heard with others, even if you knew they weren't ready to hear it? No further reliable records of Dr. Thomas Elwood Morris exist after this date. His death certificate was filed in 1954. The cause was listed as heart failure. No family claimed his remains. University colleagues arranged a small memorial service. Fewer than 10 people attended. The original recording was never recovered. All copies were reportedly destroyed in the Camp Ellis incident. Nothing remained of Experiment 417 except the memories of those who had heard it, and whatever effect it had left upon them. But that is not quite the end of the story. In 1963, a graduate student researching the history of acoustic physics discovered a reference to Dr. Morris in university archives. Intrigued by the sudden end to his academic career, the student began investigating. His inquiry led him to Elizabeth Chen, then working as a librarian in San Francisco. Miss Chen refused a formal interview. But according to the student's notes, she made a single cryptic statement. The recording wasn't what mattered. It was the space between the sounds, the pauses, the silence, was where it actually spoke. The student expanded his research. He traced the whereabouts of the 7 known listeners. Professor Nichols had died in his remote cabin, cause of death undetermined due to the delay in discovering his body. Dr. Helen Porter led her religious community in Wisconsin, refusing all contact with outsiders. Dr. Sullivan had abandoned physics entirely, becoming a scholar of comparative religion at a small college in Vermont. Dean Harrison had suffered a cerebral hemorrhage in 1958. His personal papers contained no mention of the Morris incident. Colonel Reed had retired from military service and declined all requests for comment. Chaplain Brennan had entered a Trappist monastery in Kentucky, taking a vow of silence that he maintained until his death. The pattern was clear. Each person who heard the recording had experienced a profound transformation, yet none would directly discuss what they had heard. In 1977, the graduate student, now a professor himself, published a small monograph titled The Voice in the Machine, The Morris Recording Incident. The book received little attention. Most academic reviewers dismissed it as an investigation into an equipment malfunction that had been exaggerated into an urban legend. But the book attracted attention from an unexpected quarter. Government representatives requested all research materials related to the publication. The author was interviewed by individuals who declined to identify their agency affiliation. No legal action was taken, but the professor reported unusual difficulties securing academic positions afterward. One final piece of the puzzle emerged in 1984. During the demolition of the original physics building at the University of Chicago, workers discovered a sealed metal container hidden within a wall cavity. Inside was a single sheet of paper, handwritten notes in what was later confirmed to be Dr. Morris's handwriting. The notes contained no description of the sound itself, no scientific data, just a series of observations written in increasingly urgent script. It responds to attention. It knows it is being recorded. It speaks differently to each listener. It is not a voice. We are the voice. It is what allows voice to exist. The final line, underlined 3 times. God is not speaking. God is the medium through which all speaking is possible. University officials transferred the document to their archives. It remained largely forgotten until 1998, when a documentary filmmaker requested access to materials related to Dr. Morris. Permission was initially granted, then abruptly revoked. The filmmaker reported that certain university records had been permanently sealed by request of a federal agency. The last known reference to the Morris recording came from an unexpected source. In 2003, a former military intelligence analyst included a brief mention of Project Whisper in his memoir. The reference was removed from subsequent editions. When questioned, the publisher cited factual inaccuracies requiring correction. The original physics building was completely demolished in 2009. The site now houses a modern research facility specializing in quantum information science. Researchers there use advanced technology to explore how information exists in states of superposition, being simultaneously present and absent. Their work involves listening for signals embedded in what appears to be random noise. They are, in essence, listening for patterns in silence. Some university employees claim the basement laboratories sometimes experience unusual acoustic phenomena. Recordings made there occasionally contain unexplained anomalies, equipment malfunctions at higher rates than elsewhere in the facility. But these are merely rumors. Nothing has been officially documented. No one has reported hearing anything like what Dr. Morris recorded in 1942. The last document was dated the year 1977. No new records have been found. Some say none of this happened. Others prefer not to comment.